Hello and welcome to Become the Teapot. I'm Iain.
And so am I.
We've been doing this for over a year now, you know the drill. We're here to discuss a comic book adaptation and the source material that inspired it in an effort to get my friend Iain here to read more comics.
This week, we've been watching Y: The Last Man. Or at least the first 7 episodes.
That's right, because we screwed up our schedule. So, whilst the whole series has come out at the time of release, it's not quite finished at the point of recording this episode.
But that doesn't matter, because it's going to be a spoiler-free episode anyway.
Yep, we don't usually care about this sort of thing, but as this series is still coming out, we thought it'd be best to avoid key plot details as much as possible.
We'll also be reading the first volume of the comic, which collects the first 10 issues.
We have no idea if that's what's covered in the first series because, well, as we said, it's not finished yet, but we're doing it anyway. Ready to get started?
Sure. Why not?
Y: The Last Man, Season 1, or at least the first 7 episodes of it. What are your thoughts?
Well, a bit of a mixed bag, really.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that I want to touch on is it's a bit of a fresh topic, you know, with the whole world pandemic.
Panini, yes.
Yeah. There's a bit in the show, I won't say who or when it happens,
Yeah.
but someone wakes up in the hospital and the nurse or the doctor says, there's been a bit of a world event, and she's obviously taken, but this person's obviously a bit shocked by it.
I mean, you can probably assume it's a she, for the most part. I mean, there are a few exceptions, but yeah.
Wow, I'm trying to be spoiler-free.
Okay.
But yeah, it feels a bit too fresh for me. I imagine that's happening right now, or has done in the last year and a bit.
Yeah, because they have been trying to make this into a film and then a TV show for years. We're talking probably, I think the comic wrapped up about 2008, and they've probably been trying to make that into a film ever since.
Yeah.
And so timing-wise, it could not really have come at a worse time.
Yeah. Well, actually, just because you say that, in 2007, the film rights were acquired by New Line Cinema.
Yeah.
With David Goyer attached as a producer. But that obviously didn't happen.
Yeah, it got caught in a bit of development hell, and obviously it's quite it's 50 issues of comic books. It's a lot to get into one film, so I always think it would be half a film, or it'd have to be a trilogy if you were going to do it that way. Because, yeah, it's a lot to fit in. I think it would work better as a series, generally.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I think it works better as this particular series, but I gotta say, I did enjoy it to an extent.
Yeah.
But I felt that a lot of the scenes, particularly the scenes at the Pentagon, while adding an extra emphasis to the political dealings and the sort of ramifications of a global event like this, it was interesting.
Yeah.
But it really hurt the pace of the show.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Those scenes occasionally felt like a real slog. And I was just waiting for it to be over, to be honest. A lot of time I was just like, can we get back to Yorick, Man and Agent 355, please? Can we just get back to the main storyline? I think it's roughly, because I've been watching it, obviously, and I've just yesterday reread the comic book. And it's roughly an issue per episode.
Yeah.
I didn't realise it was quite that lined up, actually. I didn't realise when I was watching it that it was pretty much succinctly an issue per episode. But obviously an issue takes you 15 minutes to read, whereas an episode is an hour long. So they really, really stretch that material out and pad it, and yeah.
Yeah, it is quite slow. It's very, very tense. But not a lot happens.
Yeah, it reminds me of, we were talked about this on a previous episode, The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
When we did that, because that's a real page turner as well, the comic book. But the same thing you notice there, particularly in series 2 and some of the worst series of that, they obviously realise that it is easier and therefore cheaper to film half an hour of people talking in hallways, in sort of overly dramatic conversations, than it is to film, 5 minutes of action out on the road. It's a lot easier to build a set, to film all your scenes there, rather than, have to do things on site.
Yeah. They're both survival shows at the end of it.
Yeah.
Well, not the end of it, but the idea of it is that, something happened. It's this where all the men have died, or it's a zombie apocalypse.
Yep.
Are they the same thing? Don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they're both fall into that realm of apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic storytelling. So, and I think it really does sort of take a lot of inspiration from the Walking Dead adaptation. And as I say, both of those comics would have started early 2000s. I think Why the Last Man came first. Both of those comics, I would say, are real page turners. They're action driven as opposed to dialogue driven or conversation driven. They're quite dialogue light.
Yeah.
They're fast paced, they're road stories, so there's a lot of similarities there between the comics. And I think the TV series as well has really leaned heavily into that. And it's not surprised because obviously The Walking Dead is one of the biggest TV series in the world.
Yeah.
There's a reason it's got about 3 or 4 spin-offs. It's AMC's cash cow. So I think they certainly, well, I don't know if it was consciously or unconsciously, emulated The Walking Dead. And I think that's okay, but there are cons that come with that as well as pros.
Yeah.
There are negatives to that as well. And I think part of that is it really hurts the pacing.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a slow burn, but it's almost too slow. And it kind of feels that at the end we'll get the answers, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah.
It's shows like Lost, which I brought up when we were talking about The Walking Dead, that have shown me that the answers either don't make sense or they're not worth the whole wait for.
Yeah.
You get an answer, you're like, well, especially with Lost, I've sat through 6, 7 seasons, whatever it was, to get an answer that I don't like, that doesn't make sense. And this kind of has that same vibe, or at least feels it does.
Yeah. See, for me, Why the Last Man, and particularly in the comic books and The Walking Dead, are very much more about the journey than having answers. I don't think it's a mystery. Well, obviously it is a mystery why this has occurred, but I don't think it's the end goal. I think the end goal is the sort of storyline of these people and what's going to happen on the journey to rebuilding, rather than having a definitive answer of what caused it. But yeah, I understand your point.
Yeah.
And that's partly, again, because the slowness of the pacing is that you are waiting for answers, and you end up with this thing where you sort of have a big event at the beginning or at end of each episode, and then you just have 40 minutes of people slowly talking in between.
Yeah. Well, I watched the pilot episode, or episode 1.
Yeah.
Left it a few weeks, watched the second one, and then we literally watched the rest of them in one day.
Right.
It's not really a show that I end an episode and I'm there going, oh, what's going to happen? Oh my God, I can't wait till next week. Like, I'm really excited. It's not that kind of show.
No.
But I feel like it should be.
Yeah.
Or it should have been, have been made that way, that you are on the edge of your seat or your sofa, thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen to that person? And, oh, this has just happened. Oh, quick, tell me.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. I was like, oh, okay, fair enough.
I agree, yeah. I think that's also partially because, I don't know about you, but so far for me, I have struggled to engage with many of the characters.
Yeah.
I struggle to emotionally connect with a lot of these characters and worry about what's actually going to be their outcome. Because I think the show cuts around too much. I think the comic book is very much based around the 3 central characters once it gets going. In particular, you've got obviously Yorick, Y of the title, you've got Agent 355, and you've got Man. Whereas the TV show has sort of made that into an ensemble piece. They cut around a lot more. You go and visit Yorick's sister, you go and visit his mother, and yes, okay, Yorick did those things, but you only really find out what happens to those in the comic book when Yorick meets them or when Yorick sees them. It follows the central protagonist through that, and you follow their journey, whereas this is laid out like an ensemble piece, so you've got multiple characters and it cuts between all these different people. And I don't think it's really necessary. I think this would have worked just as well if it had just followed the main characters. And in fact, it probably would have worked better because you would have been more emotionally connected to them.
Yeah, pretty much my exact same view. There's a lot of people in this that I don't trust and I don't really like. I'm not going to go through characters because we're trying to be spoiler light.
Yeah.
But yeah, Yorick is the only one that I really like. And his monkey, of course, Amp. Great name for a monkey.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like him and his monkey, the characters that I enjoy. I want it to go back to him. And I want to find out what's happening around him, not about politics and this and that and blah, blah.
Yeah, the show didn't actually click for me until about, I think it's 4 or 5, when you got 355 and Yorick together and they were out on the road and you had that road trip set up after that.
Yeah.
That's when it really started to work for me. But I think the problem with that for a TV show is a lot of people won't watch that far. They're going to watch the first 2 episodes, maybe if you're lucky, and decide whether they're going to continue or not. So to not really get into it until those characters got together. And I do like Agent 355 is really good, and I like the portrayal of Yorick. I think he's a bit more unlikable than he is in the comic book, but that may just be because in the comic it's more of a blank slate. You project likable qualities onto these characters where they're maybe not even there. But yeah, because obviously he is in both versions, and this is not a spoiler because obviously it's right at the beginning, he is a bit of a man-child, a bit of a, arrested development. He is not, he's not Chad McGruff who's going to come in and save the world. He is a bit of a useless guy, and that's quite, I like the idea that would be the last surviving member with a white chromosome, as they say.
Just this sort of random guy who doesn't really care or doesn't take things too seriously. He's sarcastic and he's funny, but that's not really the qualities that you want for potentially the only man who can continue the human race.
And also, I didn't really think he became sarcastic or funny until, again, episode 3 or 4. I think in the first couple of episodes, because he's on his own largely, you just sort of see his survival. So again, it's hard to identify with that. It's only, again, when he gets teamed up.
Yeah.
Because obviously him and Agent 355 are like chalk and cheese, and that's what works about their dynamic, is the fact that they are completely different people. One is very stoic and action-driven, and one is incompetent but funny and jokey.
It's the classic buddy cop kind of film.
Yeah.
One's strict, one's not.
They're
the odd couple. Yeah, there you go.
And I think that's where the show's strengths lie.
Yeah, I just want to pull it back a little bit to the whole survival and the journey thing that they've... I mean, that's in the comic as well, but it definitely feels pushed forwards in the TV show, if that makes sense. It's got a very survival horror kind of PS4 game to it.
Is there a specific PS4 game you're related to?
Well, Last of Us, that kind of thing. They have to go here to get a thing, and then their plans change. Now they've got to go there to get a thing, and then, the thing isn't there, so they've now got to go there.
Yeah.
And it's predictable.
It's a way of keeping them on the road, isn't there?
Yeah.
So it's basically the same as you get with the Walking Dead comic book. It is a way of getting people from travelling from point A to point B, and the stories that unfold on that journey. And again, this is what I mean about it being less about the destination than it is what's occurring in between. So it almost doesn't matter what MacGuffin they're going towards at any one point. It's just what happens in the meantime.
It seems like these episodes should have been like 45 minutes rather than an hour.
Yeah.
Cut them down a bit, because most of them were like 59-minute mark.
Perhaps it should have been 2 issues per episode, just packed a bit more into them rather than going along at such a leisurely pace. Because presumably if it is an issue per episode, that requires you to have 5 seasons. Now, obviously, FX have recently announced, before the show even ended, which is a very strange move, that they will not be renewing the show.
Yeah.
So the showrunners are apparently attempting to shop it around to other networks.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see someone like HBO Max, who deal with all the other DC Vertigo stuff, picking it up, maybe. So what do you think for the show's future, first of all? And also, if they manage to get picked up elsewhere, would you continue watching it?
Well, we're at that point of human life, I guess, where if something's cancelled, it doesn't mean that it's dead. Brooklyn Nine-Nine got cancelled, and within 24 hours, it was back again. It went from Fox to wherever it went.
Yeah, Scrubs, Lucifer.
Yeah.
All of those things got cancelled and went to other networks. There was a few others.
So realistically, it's probably going to get picked up from someone else.
Well, I think a lot of...
I don't know, though.
This is the thing. A lot of them do try and shop it around. And more often than not, they're not picked up. It's just we are now into an era where you do hear stories about certain things that do get picked up, if they've got a large enough fan base.
Yeah.
What's weird for me is the fact that they did announce it before the end of the show, because usually they'll show the whole season. And the problem is, if by announcing it 3 episodes before the end of the season, people are not now going to tune in to a show that they know is already cancelled.
Yeah.
So it just seems a bit odd.
Something that I did actually put in my notes that relates to this pretty much is that I think the show is trying to build towards character development.
Yes.
But I don't really care because, like you said, it's been cancelled. I've been watching this with whatever the opposite is to rose-tinted glasses.
Right.
Whatever the opposite of that is, I've been wearing those.
A shit-stained monocle or something.
Just the fact that I know that it's cancelled, deep down, I don't think it will get picked up. It's possible, but I don't think it will be. If it does, I'll probably keep watching.
Yeah.
Maybe. It depends. I don't know.
I know what you mean. It's interesting you say about building towards character development. That's interesting because, you're right, I think. But the problem with that is you need to give a reason to care about the characters in the first place so that you want to see these characters develop. You can't hinge it on the possibility of saying, yeah, somewhere down the line, Yorick will grow into more of a competent person, or somewhere down the line, Agent 355 will soften a bit, or somewhere down, you can't work on the presumption that the audience is going to be engaged enough for them to tune in until that happens. You've got to give them a reason to care early doors. And I think that's where the programme probably suffered.
I think with the TV show especially, there's so many titles, I guess, or genres that are being used in this. It's politically driven.
Yeah.
Not saying the comic book's not, because it is.
There's a little bit, but again, it's only when Yorick is there to witness it.
Yeah.
So in the first 10 issues, I think he's there for issues 2 and 3, and then he sort of buggers off, and you don't cut back to the White House after that.
Yeah.
All of the political machinations in the White House or the Pentagon in the TV show are invented for the screen, or at least strung out for the TV.
Yeah. I mean, it's also trying to portray survival guilt as well.
Yeah.
There's plenty of hidden agendas. Like I said, I don't trust a lot of the characters.
Yeah.
And I think they are pushing towards that. And also it's got the overarching of a dystopian drama.
Yeah.
So I think it's trying to do too much at once. And it sidelines, or at least pushes, the most interesting part of the story, which to me is the scientific reason why it's Y that's alive. And it's Monkey, in fact. That plot point is hidden by the bureaucratic bullshit.
Yeah. I agree with you. Even though I don't think the bit that interests me is not finding out what caused this, but the journey with these 3 characters and how that is going to affect the storyline going forward. I feel that the bureaucratic side of things, the political side of things, is very much stagnant. Literally it is in one place. It's in one location, and it is a storyline that could be told in one episode.
Yeah.
It so far has been the same thing, episode to episode to episode. A character scheming or talking to each other, and I get that they want to slow burn that thing, but it just detracts from the more interesting plot lines.
Yeah.
Which are, coincidentally, the plot lines from the comic book.
Yeah.
But speaking of the comic book, I mean, for me, that is a real page-turner. By contrast to this TV show, which is slow-paced, the comic is you whiz through that thing. And this is where the budget constraints of television fall down, because you could no way sustain the level of action and different sets and locations across a whole series.
Yeah.
So I do understand why they've added these more affordable plot lines and slowed the whole thing down. But I think when you do that, you lose, for me, what is the comic's greatest strength, and that is it's fun.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, what did you think of the comics? Obviously, you're reading this for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, this has been one that's been on my list for a while, actually, even pre-podcast. And I bought it before, again, the podcast. So it's something that I've heard you talk about. I've heard other people say, really good.
Yeah, Josh recommended it when he came on the show.
Exactly. So I thought, right, I will pick up the first one, see what it's like. Because is there 2 or 3 more of these? I can't remember how many.
There are 5 in total, so 50 issues of comic
5 volumes,
each
right.
one with 10 issues, yeah.
Yeah, because this is 10 issues. Last episode, we read 3 issues for 30 days, which that really was painful to read almost. It wasn't interesting enough.
Yeah.
Well, this is 10 issues, and similar to what I did with the TV show, I read the first couple of issues, and then I put it down, and then I read 8 to 10 literally in one go. I was very much like, right, I'll go to the toilet after this one, or I'll go get a drink after this one. And then I never did. I was like, right, let's just read through it, because I wanted to know what happens.
Yeah.
That's the contrast to the TV show, that I chose to sit down and have a read of it in one go, and I was excited to see what was coming.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a page turner. It is one that you read through. Obviously I've read this before, but I raced through it this time around again. And I think what's more, the thing that the TV show didn't manage that the comic did was to make me care about the characters.
Yeah, 100%.
That's largely because it follows Yorick right from the off. We get those glimpses of all different people, different women around the world. And afterwards, then we reveal Yorick is the survivor. That's the first issue. After that, we follow his story.
Yeah.
And it follows him, even with the little cutaways to other characters. It is by and large about him. And I understand that they wanted to make particularly a TV show about the subject matter that it is, which is only one surviving male with a Y chromosome. I understand why they wanted to give more focus to female characters in that storyline. But at the end of the day, the unique thing about this story is about a lone man who has survived, or a lone man with a Y chromosome who has survived in this world. And so he is what you want to follow. He is what you want to hear.
Yeah.
And if you don't follow him early on in the story, which the TV show didn't, you're not going to suddenly care about him 3 or 4 episodes in.
Yeah, your focus gets pulled too far. and there's too much happening.
Yeah.
Where, like I said, in the book, it's literally his journey. This is the character that you'll be seeing throughout the whole thing. His mum in the TV show, it's not really a spoiler, but she's quite a prominent character. In the comic, she's in the the second issue.
Yeah, well, Diane Lane is obviously cast as the mother in the TV show. She is top billed, so she is the first person credited in this. In fact, the guy who plays Yorick is credited quite far down the credits, actually, which just shows the TV's mentality with this, is that he is not the main character anymore. And I think that is actually to the show's detriment rather than its benefit. But then we are two straight white men sitting here talking about this. So someone else may have a completely different response to that. You know, for me, I just felt from a narrative perspective, the storyline that was most interesting was being sidelined. And also, I think because we follow Yorick from the beginning of the comic book, we experience the world through him. I think what comes through having a smaller, more focused cast, rather than the information being relayed to us and to the president and then us, the audience, by a political aide or another survivor, and someone just coming on and telling us what's going on, we just see firsthand through their journey how the world has changed. And I think that's a more interesting way of experiencing this world than just being told things.
Yeah, 100%. I do like the way that it's been made as well. It's not just the normal, this is the start, this is the middle, this is the end. They do unique takes on how to portray the plot. The first issues, first of all, it's packed. There's a lot that happens in that those first couple of pages, really.
Yeah.
But then I love the way the countdown has been shown, and it shows it across all different places across the country, like 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1, and that's the end. You're like, oh God, what happened? Let me know what happens.
It makes you want to keep reading, doesn't it? It really does. Yeah.
And then even the small things as well. When Y has on his mask, the text is a lot smaller when he's speaking. So either he's trying to whisper or he's changing his voice in a way. It's just these sort of small things that I like to pick up on and go, oh, that's nice. At least they've thought about that.
Little techniques like that, comic book storytelling, that is just nicely implemented, yeah. And
then also there's the use of the flashbacks. So it's like now and then an hour ago. So you do that thing where you see what's happening and you don't know what's happening. And they'll flash back like an hour ago or a day ago, and you'll find out what's happened up to that point.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's been brought across into shows such as Breaking Bad. Yeah. They always start off an episode with something random, and then you realise that it's part of the plot.
In media res, I think it's called. You start in the middle of the action, and then you unfold what has happened before to get you to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in this way, in this book, with this story, it works so well. It's probably the best way that they could tell the story without it just being ABC.
Yes. And the TV show does implement that a little bit. And I think the way it does it in the TV show is by cutting away to the White House or the Pentagon and doing the political side of things. And then when we rejoin the journey, they're in a completely different location, completely different set. So it jumps forward in their journey as well. But yeah, I agree. I think the time dynamics that you get in the comic work better in that. But it has been a bit overplayed in TV lately, so I can see they wanted to simplify that so they didn't have to jump around quite so much. But it's something that's been done to death, because obviously this, I think, was 2002 to 2008, this comic book, or something like that. So it has been something that's been done to death since then, so not quite as imaginative these days, but still very fun to read.
Yeah, so we spoke about Yorick's character, I guess, in the TV show earlier on. It's very similar to the comics.
Yeah.
So they've not gone too wrong with him, but it's Agent 35, no?
355.
But it's Agent 355 that, to me anyway, feels a lot more human in the comic.
Yes, they've definitely hardened her up in the TV show.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to get like a backstory or a flashback coming up in the series.
You've had glimpses already. I think there is scenes in the latest episode, I think it was, where there were glimpses of her previous life. But yeah, they're definitely leaning heavily into the stoicism and the aggressive nature of that character, which is certainly less in the comic book. But again, I think that might be because you follow these characters and they're more at the forefront of the storyline, I think. So perhaps that's why you get to know them a bit better. But yeah, no, I agree with you about Yorick, because I have read online a few people saying that they didn't like Yorick in the show and they didn't like the adaptation of the character, whereas I think it's quite a faithful adaptation in terms of he's not a particularly likeable character, he's not a particularly useful character in either. He's not the kind of guy you would want around in an emergency. And he's a bit whiny, but that's, you can see that there's going to be some character growth, and it leaves room for that character growth rather than just being stud manly at the beginning and being all cool and great, and then also being cool and great at the end, or whatever it is.
Yeah. I care more about him in the book than I do the show.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier on, he's my favourite character in the show.
Yeah.
It's just... The show, from what I've seen online, because of the cancellation and everything like this, if you look it up on Twitter or any social media, really, the term woke is being thrown around a hell of a lot. And I mean, I'm not in the best position to talk about this because we're two white men. But the comic does address the same aspects as the show. Yes. They talk about sexism, racism, and the politics part of it, really.
Yeah.
But to me, it feels more natural. It feels quite forced in there at points. I'm not saying all the time, but at points in the show, it's quite ham-fisted.
Yeah, no. It definitely lends itself some very clumsy dialogue. Obviously, they wanted to make trans people more represented in the TV show because they were mentioned in an early issue. I think it's the second issue they mentioned.
It does come up. In
a not particularly nice terminology, but we have had 15 years of development and understanding since those times. Our understanding of these issues has grown, I like to think, as a whole. But it was certainly mentioned in the comic book about how trans men have survived. And obviously it's mentioned that one of them is killed by the Amazons. So they are mentioning that. There were some very clunky dialogue bits in the TV show where they obviously wanted to address this, where characters would ask Yorick, well, he takes off his mask and goes, "Have you got a Y chromosome?" And it's like, well, sorry, no one speaks like that.
No one's going to ask that question.
Yeah, no one is going to ask that question in that manner. I understand what point you're getting at, and, as someone who does consider themselves in the wokest side of politics, it is something that still felt clunky to me.
Yeah.
But I understand why it's included. I understand why they wanted to highlight it more, and also highlight the female characters more, because a story in a worldwide pandemic that kills off all men, and then to just focus on a male character is silly. But the comic focuses actually a lot on Dr. Man and 355 as well. And I've got to say, actually, Dr. Man in the TV show, I really liked her as well. She came across very well, quite comedic in the TV show. And yeah, so those three characters, actually, the three main characters from the comic book, I really like in the TV show.
I've got my doubts over 355, not as an actor or a character, just comparing it to the comic.
Right.
I prefer her a lot more in the comic.
I think she's softer in the comic book, not quite as aggressive and in your face, but there's a mystery aspect that they've introduced with the TV show that I think is hurting the character a bit, because you constantly have a character that is hiding something from the main characters, and that always gets annoying in TV shows.
Yeah.
As soon as the drama hinges around the characters not talking to each other, as soon as it could all be resolved if you just went and said something to that person, and they don't do that. It's just irritating.
Yeah.
It is poor. I mean, I don't want to say poor writing, but it's just poor writing. It's just something that could easily be resolved if everyone just had a lovely conversation. But they don't do that. And I know people don't do that in real life, but at the end of the day, it's not real life.
Well, to sort of, not that I want to, but to put it back to being woke, I wonder if the show didn't come out and then for some reason this comic became huge. So the comic got a re-release, I guess. Would people...
But this comic was huge. This comic is huge. I mean, it's an Eisner Award-winning comic book. It is best-selling comic book. It is... On the front page here, it is Stephen King has written the main quote on the front here.
Hold on. Are you going to quote corner?
I'm going to quote corner. Stephen King, the best graphic novel I've ever read. On the back here, we've got glowing reviews from the Los Angeles Times, Boston Now, the New York Times, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It has won 3 Eisner Awards. This is a big, big comic book. As far as comic books go.
Yeah. My point being is... From what I've seen online, people are calling the TV show woke, but they're not calling the comic book woke. But I guess that kind of goes back to what you were sort of saying earlier on, is that when you're reading it, the dictation is up for interpretation, almost.
Yeah, you inflect your own views on these things.
Yeah, when it's on screen, it's acted a certain way. The actor and the producer, the director, all of the people have gone, right, you need to act in this way. This is how we want the scene to be shown. This is how we want your character to be portrayed.
There's less room for interpretation, yeah. But I mean, the comic book is absolutely woke, if we're going to use that term. It's, you know, it's very much a feminist tale in a way. I know it's written by a Brian K. Vaughan, I believe, is a straight white male. I know it is written from his perspective. The art is Pia Guerra, who is a female artist, and is very, very good art as well. I'll just throw in because we haven't really touched on that much. But
very good.
It is a very much, you know, if this was brought to the screen faithfully, you know, as in literal transition into a film or whatever it is, I think people would still be throwing these accusations at it. And that is just because of the disparity between how many people watch and experience a TV show or a film versus how many people read a comic book. And it tends to be that people who read the comic books have sought that thing out, and they are therefore going to have similar views. It's not just someone who's turned on the TV in the middle of it or has heard about this thing and decides to get angry. It's the same thing we get with, very recently, Superman, son of Kal-El.
Yeah.
Who has come out as bisexual, it's been revealed.
Yeah.
And people have kicked off online. And it's all people who don't read comic books. It's people who shouldn't be getting involved with this shit anyway, because it doesn't involve them.
Yeah.
It's people who, you know, who get up on their high horse no matter what it is, because they've seen some cause that they can throw the word woke around and get angry about it and say, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, because they've just heard about something. But at the end of the day, you know, comic books have had gay characters for ages, and then it gets widely reported like Kal-El, or the son of Kal-El, rather, Jonathan Kent, coming out as bisexual, and the news has a field day. And a load of people who've never read comics or haven't read comics since they were children don't give a shit about these things, are never going to give a shit about these things unless there's something to get enraged about. And to those people, you know, I just say, fuck off. just stay out of it. It's nothing to do with you. Don't like it, you don't have to read it.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's, you know, if you don't like the show, don't watch it.
Yeah.
If you don't like comic books, or you don't like this comic, don't read it.
Exactly.
If it's something that you pick up and you read the first issue and go, nah, not for me, put it down.
And if the reason you're not doing that is because you don't agree with the politics, okay, fine. But don't go on about it. Don't campaign against it. Don't crusade about it. You know, it means a lot more to people that it means something to than it means to you. At the end of the day, so you know, the character of Jonathan Kent in the comic books coming out as bisexual means a lot more to people who are bisexual, who have representation now in the comic books that they like and they love, than it means to someone, you know, fucking the guy who played Superman in Superman, The New Adventures of Superman, Clark and Lois, or whatever it was called.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever his name. You know, he's been on the TV moaning about it. And it's like, you don't read these comics, do you? You don't care. You've just seen a reason to get your name out there.
He might do. You don't know. He might do.
He doesn't. He doesn't. I think he's admitted he doesn't on Twitter or something. He says, well, if he did this, I might read it. And then people have quite really pointed out and gone, they have been doing that. That is a thing that exists in the comic book, and you would know that if you had read them. But you didn't. You played Superman in the 90s, and now you've seen a reason to get your name out on this. Anyway. I feel like I'm going off topic here. Shall we get back to the show? Do you have any eggs this week?
Yeah, so this was very hard for me this week, as I've been trying to be spoiler-free. But let's see how it goes.
All right, cue the music. Iain's egg hunt. Iain's egg hunt. Iain's egg hunt.
I'm not yoking you. So, yeah, quite a difficult one, but I do like the use of symmetry in the show. I think it's spot on. I'm going to try and stay at the start of the season and the book.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So, early shots from the first episode, there's a reflection of some red tape, which then forms an X, which I thought that's quite clever. And then the empty town streets form a Y as they all come together.
Yeah, which happens in the comic as well, doesn't it? There's a Y junction.
That's a very similar part of the comic. They're obviously hinting towards the X and the Y chromosome even before you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming you've seen the trailer, so I guess you do know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think anyone tuning into this show probably knows the general plot.
Yeah, it's bringing it to sort of the forefront, but I like they've sort of put these bits in there.
Yeah, a little bit of symbolism. Nice.
Yeah. And in the first episode as well, actually, the first episode, as we've said, has pretty good parallels with the comic. You've got Yorick hanging upside down in a straight jacket in the episode and in the comic, which I do quite like. But behind him in the show, there's a poster for, I think it's Thurston, the magician,
right?
Which is Howard Thurston. I'm probably saying his name wrong. He was a famous magician from the late 1800s.
Right.
Just quite like that they put that in there in the background.
Is he sort of a precursor to Houdini type?
Yeah, exactly. or after. I don't know when Houdini was around. I don't do times.
Okay.
And as I said, it's quite hard for me to do the eggs this week, but this next one may contain a spoiler to the show because it's not happened yet. But if you don't want to know anything, skip ahead 30 or so seconds, pop on to the conclusion.
I think if this is super spoilery, I may bleep it. But
No, it's not super spoily.
Okay,
but
all right.
There's a crib that is seen in Dr. Mann's office or her room, but there isn't a child.
Yeah.
So I think this is probably a nod to her being pregnant with her own clone in the first issue of the comic.
Yeah, because that was addressed very early in the comic book. Yeah. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Is that
So
it for this week?
there you go. Yes.
That was, so that's speculation as opposed to a spoiler, I suppose. So yes, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the TV show and the comic book then. In terms of both, what were your thoughts?
I found the comic book a lot more entertaining, a lot more engaging, and more interesting, really, than the TV show.
Yeah.
I'll still watch the TV show, and like we said, if it gets picked up for a second season, I'll probably watch it. Considering that when we spoke about The Walking Dead, I said that I was probably going to continue watching it. I watched 2 episodes of season 2 and then stopped.
Yeah.
It's still on my list.
I'm not
but...
surprised, though. Season 2 was a bit of a slog, I remember.
But yeah, I think because I know there's 1,200 seasons of that show, I will go back to it at some point. But because this is quite a new show, if they do a season 2, I don't have that mind frame of going, I've got to watch this for 20,000 years.
Yeah.
It should be quite short, should be quite self-contained, but...
Well, in theory, if it is 1 issue per episode, then, 10 episodes per series, 5 series.
Yeah.
So it would be done in that time, which would be a nice length to tell the story in. I think you probably could have done it in half of that, but that's by the by.
What were your views then overall? I mean, I know you've read this before.
Yeah, so for me, the TV show was okay. It had a lot of the same problems as The Walking Dead, as I said, which I can only assume are related to budget constraints and the need to stretch it out over 10 episodes. But overall, I didn't hate it. I quite enjoyed it at times, but I doubt I would have stuck with it if I hadn't have read the comic book.
Yeah, I do wonder how people who haven't read the comic will interpret it, I guess, or enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you watched it before reading it, presumably, so interesting to see your thoughts. I mean, for me, not everything needs to be an ensemble show. It started with things like Lost, and it just isn't necessary. I wish they would have dialed back the Pentagon scenes and make it more focused on Yorick, Mann, and 355, so we could really get to know those characters and experience the world through them. The comic book, as you already know, I have a soft spot for stories that deal with the apocalypse or post-apocalypse, zombies, Fallout, Mad Max. I love all of that. So the comic for me is a fresh take on that genre, and it was one of the first complete series that I ever read. So, I'd obviously read things like Marvel and DC before, but those were a part of an ongoing world.
Yeah.
Whereas this was the first self-contained thing I read. And as such, it has got a bit of a special place in my heart. And I'm happy to say that on rereading it, I still really enjoyed it. I'm even tempted to continue reading the rest again as I've already started it. Just finish up the 50 issues because it is still entertaining. It's still a rip-roaring adventure. It still has elements of mystery, but good characters. I think that some of the politics have certainly, we have progressed since this was written in terms of our understanding of these things. But generally speaking, it is, its heart is in the right place. It is, it is still covering the same themes as the TV show, but perhaps in a less enlightened perspective. But generally speaking, no, really good fun.
It's something that I know I tend to always say this, but to me, it's such an easy read and it's so engaging that I'm going to read the rest of it at some point. I will go on to volume 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So
jumped ahead.
In that case, I'll skip ahead. So what was Kate's opinion of the TV show?
Well, yeah, we were talking about what we thought people, or at least what I thought people who haven't read it before would think. I know I watched and then read, but still. But Kate is that person. She probably won't go and read the comic, but her views on the show, it's good so far, but the pace has definitely slowed down. Yeah,
which is basically what we've said here.
Yeah. I think all of us are on the same page here, which is a first.
I think Hayley is roughly on the same page as that. I think most people would struggle to watch this show and not think, Jesus Christ, this could be being a bit faster. just pick it up a little bit.
I wonder how many people are going to wait until the whole season's up and then just binge it.
But like I said, I'm not sure it's entirely bingeable because it's a little bit slow. But that remains to be seen. We can't really say because we've been watching it episode to episode. So
I kind of feel like it's one of those shows that you put on whilst you're doing something else.
which is not a ringing endorsement, is it?
No.
I think that's it then for the TV show and the comic book. Any other business?
For once, not this week.
Okay.
Unless you've got anything.
I actually haven't planned anything. What should we do then? Are we going to do anything or are we just going to wrap it up?
Should we just lean into the mics and whisper? What should we do?
Well, if you don't have anything, should we do what have you been up to lately? Haven't done that for a while.
Yeah, that is very, very true. What have I been up to lately? I've gone back to play Final Fantasy VII remastered version.
Oh.
I'm not talking the HD PS4 version. I'm talking the old school shitty graphics.
And is it good? I think I have that on Steam, but yeah.
It is, yeah. I'm not that far in, but it is fun. I did do the mistake of renaming Cloud, and then I forgot that I now have to rename every character because I can't just have Cloud as my character and then the rest of them normal.
Yeah.
I now have to make a name for everyone, which is very hard and annoying.
What did you rename Cloud?
Jaws.
Jaws.
Because that is Papa Jaws is my gamer tag.
Okay.
So
Have you renamed all the rest of the characters then? Got any interesting names?
I have, but I'm not going to go into it. No, it's not interesting.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Too rude for...
Too rude? No, I just can't be asked to explain them.
A load of in-jokes that no one will get. No, that's fair enough.
Exactly. Okay. What have you been up to of late?
So I think, as I said in our last episode, we have been continuing our horror movie marathon. So we are up to Hammer horror of the 60s. We're just about to go into the 70s with things like Don't Look Now. I've also been to the cinema a bit of late. Ooh. We went to see Seven Samurai on the big screen. I don't know why it was re-released on the big screen.
Never seen it.
It's one of my favourite films. Excellent film. I really like the films of Akira Kurosawa. And just seeing it on the big screen made it all the better.
Was that one of the films that inspired the Magnificent Seven, I want to say?
Yeah, the Magnificent Seven is a remake of it.
Yeah.
Set in the West rather than samurais.
But the first one that came out...
Well, both.
Sorry, you mean the remake. I've got you. Never mind. Caught up.
Both Magnificent Sevens are a remake of The Seven Samurai, as is A Bug's Life, the Pixar film.
What?
Is Seven Samurai. A group of farmers recruiting warriors to defend their village from an invading force, bandits. And it's also something that's been referenced a lot in The Mandalorian and Star Wars, because obviously Star Wars, the original one, was influenced by other Akira Kurosawa films. So yeah, I've watched that. And yes, just yesterday I went to see Dune on the big screen, or Dune.
Ooh.
And that...
Dune or Dune?
If
Dune.
you get the chance to watch that on as big a screen as possible, I would highly recommend it. It was very, very good. If a little incomplete, because it is a sort of part one, but just visually stunning. Very good.
I have heard it's good, actually. A certain friend today said, let's go watch it today. And I said, no, because I can't be asked. It's a Sunday.
Which friend was it?
Just bleep this bit out. Kirsten.
Ah, why are we bleeping Kirsten? Do we not like her?
No. Yeah, we do.
You just ditched her.
Yeah, I don't really like to go to see a film, especially a long film like that, on a Sunday night before I've got work in the morning.
That's fair.
But I've been told it's very Lord of the Rings-esque kind of scope.
In terms of scale, yeah, it is very epic. It does feel very epic in terms of scale. And it has that sort of open-endedness of Fellowship. I did think Fellowship did a better job of having a more complete story within itself, you know, the formation of the Fellowship and then the falling apart of the Fellowship. Kind of like the first Star Wars is one chapter in a larger story, but it feels like a self-contained film. This definitely felt like a part one, but I still very much enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
So this is just a book, isn't it? It's a film. Yeah. It's a book turned film.
Yeah.
It's not like a sequel or a remake of a film.
Well, it has been adapted before. It was adapted by David Lynch in the 80s.
Right.
They made Dune once before.
Dune?
But they tried to condense a whole book. I mean, on Audible, for instance, this is an over 20-hour long book. You know,
Jesus Christ.
And they tried to make it into a 2-hour film. And as such, it was fairly incoherent. And, you know, technology, I don't think was quite there. And there was a lot of David Lynchiisms that made it a bit strange. But... definitely some nice visuals in it, but yeah, overall not great film. So this is another attempt at that, because it is Frank Herbert Dune is one of the big inspirations in terms of sci-fi storytelling. It is a huge novel.
Yeah.
In terms of science fiction, it is one that's massively inspired Star Wars as well. So speaking of Seven Samurai inspiring Star Wars, and this is another one because obviously all of Tatooine and the sand dunes and the planets like that are all very much inspired by Frank Herbert's Dune.
Yeah.
As well.
Something else that, well, we spoke about, I would say recently, it probably wasn't, was the Tomorrow War.
Jesus, that was a while ago, yeah. When that first came out, yeah, that was a few months back.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
I got around to watching it on my own. Kate was out, so I thought I'd pop it on. I actually quite enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's a fun action. A couple of, surprises in there, I guess. Not really edge of the seat kind of film, but...
Was it the kind of film you put on while you were doing something else?
Well, it was a film that I thought I'd go to bed, and I thought, my options here are watch the Tomorrow War even, or go to bed.
Yeah.
So I chose to watch the Tomorrow War.
Okay.
But I think that's a film that Chris Pratt holds, really. It's sort of on his shoulders.
It is a little bit. I just felt it was quite an interesting premise, but it was a little bit all over the place in terms of the plot, especially that last act where they come back to the present day and go off and do that thing, and, and it all becomes very alien-like rather than the rest of it, which was all very Edge of Tomorrow, whatever that film was called, Live, Die, Repeat.
I think it was called
3
both.
lines for that.
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's...
Yeah.
Yeah, I preferred that film, but I've got to say, Tomorrow War was not a film I'll be rushing out to rewatch. It wasn't terrible, but...
No, it wasn't terrible. I had a good time with it. It's not quite... I always have this term, which a lot of people have, it's a turn-off-your-brain fun film.
Right.
That's what I say about Fast and Furious films, which actually, don't really want to talk about it, but I also watched Hobbs and Shaw, Fast and Furious film. That is a turn-off-your-brain and watch-it film.
See, my problem with that phrase, and I have heard that phrase before, is that I require my brain to function all of my bodily functions. So I can't turn my brain off. I physically cannot turn my brain off enough for some films. I appreciate enjoyable action films, but there are some films that I just think this is a bad action film.
Oh, yeah. There's plenty out there.
The excuse that, don't think about it too much is just never one that really applies to me, because I'm always thinking, I could go and watch Dread for the 100th time rather than watching a really bad action film. I could go and watch Mad Max Fury Road rather than watching a really bad action film. I could watch all these really enjoyable Die Hard, great action films, rather than just going, I'm gonna settle. I'm gonna settle and turn off my mind.
Well, yeah, the reason that I bring up that phrase is that I don't think the Tomorrow War is one of those films. It's not your blanket, this is your action film, this is your hero, they're done. There are a couple of twists and turns in it.
Yeah.
Some predictable, some not. And we always love, and I say we because I know that you do, we always love a good J.K. Simmons cameo, I guess, or scene.
He's in two scenes. He shows up at the beginning and the end, and it's like, needs more J.K. Simmons, 0 stars. Any film that has J.K. Simmons that doesn't use him to his full potential.
I will wrap up this section with a recommendation that I think you should watch. It's something on Netflix.
Okay.
And it's called Attack on the Hollywood Cliches.
Okay.
I think it's about an hour long, hosted by, I think it's Rob Lowe, I want to say. He literally goes through the history of Hollywood films and goes through all the cliches, such as when you've got an action scene and an army of people and one person fighting, it's always a one-on-one fight or action.
Yeah, they take him one at a time rather than all charging in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And a bunch of other things in there. We watched that a few weeks back, and we're watching films now or TV shows, and Kate's like, I can see that they were talking about, and that there and that there. And
okay.
I think it's right up your street.
I'll check it out. Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much. That's all for this week. If you enjoyed Why the Last Man, then why not check out Brian K. Vaughan's other works? There's a lot of great stuff to choose from, whether it's his Marvel work with Runaways, the space opera Saga, or the wonderful Pride of Baghdad. As always, you can get in touch with us on Twitter at becometheteapot or emailing us at becometheteapot@hotmail.com. We can also be found on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, or scavenging the streets as we survive day to day in a post-apocalyptic hellscape. That one seems a bit close to home, actually. Either way, if you see us out there, please consider donating a subscribe. Just one could save our lives. Next episode, as the weather here is getting colder, we're going to be watching and reading Whiteout. Nope, us neither. but it's actually a 2009 film starring Kate Beckinsale, based on an Eisner Award-winning series by Greg Rucka and Steve Lieber.
I have no idea what you're going on about.
So, hello Ian.
All right, mate.
No, hello, let me start that again. So, why The Last Man?